I'm your host, Taylor Ann Carpenter, and welcome to The Talk Chamber, a production of the Greater Memphis Chamber. The Talk Chamber is the podcast for the latest on the Chamber, economic development, and all things Memphis. Our guest today is Greater Memphis Chamber's Chief Government Affairs Officer, Bobby White. Bobby, we are so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Taylor Ann. I'm absolutely happy to be here.
So before we really dive into government affairs and your work at the Chamber, tell us a little bit about your history in government affairs.
Oh my, well, I would probably say that my work in government affairs, I probably have to go back a ways to, I don't know, about the fourth grade. I got really interested in government early on. My mom was a fifth grade teacher at a little school, Montessori school in the Westwood community called Doubletree. And she was a fifth grade teacher, and she got into this thing of wanting to teach kids about the three branches of government. And so came up with the idea of taking busload of kids to Washington, D.C. Every year. And it went from 1 to 4 buses going to D.C. annually, where many kids who were going uptown for the first time. I went on that trip, I know, probably 4 times, right? Given that I had special perks since my mom was the teacher. Her, Gaynell White, shout out to my mom, Peggy Heron, a few others. So goes back that much. And then kind of picks up in college. I started working at Mayor Maynard Jackson, who was also a graduate of Morehouse, and the way that I got started doing student advocacy work then. And from there, helping get a member of Congress elected, worked at the federal level for a member of Congress, at the county level for a county mayor, city level, a mayor's office, and also state level for a Department of Education. To use a baseball term, I've kind of hit for the cycle.
Okay, awesome. And so now you are at the Chamber. You've been at the Chamber for how many years?
It's 5 years. Feels like longer because in those previous roles that I've mentioned, I worked with the Chamber in some capacity, probably over the last 18, 20 years almost.
And so as Chief Government Affairs Officer, what is your primary role? What's your responsibility?
I am a troubleshooter. As it relates to, I used to call myself ombudsman in chief, if you will. And then I recognize I may want to get rid of that title because people really do call you with those individualized problems and issues their business might face, when in fact they may need to hire an attorney, right? But no, the work is, I kind of reference myself. I worked in government for years, as I mentioned, and there's a organization in government, it's called General Services. And General Services, they essentially, whether it's a federal, state, or local level, General Services kind of provides support to the other divisions. And so I view my work in that way, where I want to help block and tackle for economic development. Our friends on that side, our friends on the workforce side, I want to help block and tackle. We do work behind the scenes that ultimately just supports the goal and mission, and much of that work has to do with the work we do with elected and public officials. And there's another part to it. It's government affairs, and advocacy is the name of my department. And the advocacy work is community advocacy, the type of work we do to connect with people and to, ensure that everyone's feeling the work and the prosperity that we try to make real for citizens of Memphis and the greater Memphis community.
Yeah, so let's kind of go a little bit further on that one and kind of move into public policy.
Sure.
And the Chamber. I think a lot of people tend to have trouble connecting those dots when it comes to the Chamber's role in public policy.
Right.
Our mission is to drive the Memphis business agenda, but a lot of people think that is strictly economic development,
right, and
that is not the case. So how do public policy and government affairs play into driving the Memphis business agenda?
Well, I think that when you think about it, I kind of think about scripture from the Bible that sometimes comes to mind when I think about the work. I think about this idea of seeds being planted, right? And sometimes it doesn't matter how good the seed is that you're planting. There are external forces that have to do with whether or not that seed, it's a good seed. And it may end up in, good ground. Let's say that good ground is our city. But there are any number of factors that have to do with whether or not that seed will grow and blossom, and whether or not people will have the benefit of the fruit or the flowers that growth might lead to. I mean, I'm in pest control, right? There are any number of items or entities that could snatch that seed out of the ground. And then you have to also make sure that it's being nurtured in the right way, and the rain or the water that you provide. And oh my, there's a shade in the way where it's not getting direct sunlight, right? So there's so many things that have to do with whether or not that seed is actually going to live out its fullest potential. So I see that our work is kind of in that space. And because many times when it comes to businesses and wanting to see them grow and thrive, because let me be clear, it's not really about the business as much as it is about the individuals who are citizens of our community who work for those businesses. They provide for their families by their work for these businesses. And I think that for me, when it comes to government affairs and in policy, it's about ensuring that we're doing everything that we can to create an environment where that seed or that investment can actually grow. So that's what public policy is for me. That's what government affairs is for me. It's ensuring that we're not self-harming by, taking actions that may stunt the growth of a seed that's been planted in the good ground. And I will say that Memphis is good ground.
On the flip side, what role does the Memphis business community play in shaping legislation that may or may not eventually become policy?
Well, first of all, I always say this when I'm communicating with elected officials: don't come up with ideas on things that impact the business community without talking to the business community. And when I say business, you have to be very careful because people paint a picture that they're thinking of these huge behemoth companies. Well, the super majority of our members overwhelmingly are small businesses. And so when we have elected officials making decisions, I would say that for anybody, right? For elected officials, public officials, you don't want to do something to companies. You want to do, I was just saying, just regarding stakeholders in general, you want to engage them. So if you are making decisions and you're thinking about a policy change or a tweak to legislation, new legislation, we want you to, before you get out there, please talk to the folks who may be impacted or may have something to do with that. And that's the role that's the main role our businesses and our members and investors can play by, number one, making their voice heard, letting us know what their challenges are and letting us know what they're trying to solve for. And then number two, allowing us to facilitate ways that we can take those challenges and allow those challenges to allow us to give advice and insights to elected officials as they shape policy, but also the role we can play to help solve for some of the challenges that they face.
So the Greater Memphis Chamber is unique in a lot of what we do, and we aren't your typical chamber in many ways, and I feel like advocacy is one of those ways.
Yeah.
What specific ways do our business community, can they get involved with the chamber and with advocacy?
Well, I will say, that happens. I was going to go toward talking about our events, but let me back away from that because not everybody can go to DC and be a part of our DC fly-in which we do once a year, or not everyone will be able to be in Nashville, a part of the Memphis to Nash, where we just had about 85 to 90 investors in Nashville meeting with members of Governor Lee's administration as well as members of the Tennessee General Assembly and other leaders in Nashville, right? The thing that the way businesses can actually be involved is to let us know what's going on with them, introduce us to their work. I say this often that this is why I had to stop telling people I was the ombudsman in chief, right? Because I'm not here to solve for every individual business, right? But we're here to help solve for things that impact a certain industry or a certain sector, things that impact businesses in a certain part of town, things that impact businesses that are of a certain makeup or, those types of things. Because the reason I say that is because the way that people can become involved is essentially by letting us know what their opportunities are, what their challenges are, because we put that into the calculus of what we do and figure out what our strategy is going to be, not just for that business, but businesses like that. So the more they share with us and let us know what's going on, what their challenges are, what their opportunities are, the more we're able to hone our advocacy and our strategy to be supportive of them and others.
Awesome. So there's a lot that I really want to discuss today.
Sure.
But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it. Last year was a super big year for the chamber.
It was.
In so many different ways.
It was.
And one of which you and your team had a huge role in. Of course, I'm referring to the I-55 bridge. We've already have an I-55 bridge.
Right.
So could you tell us, what's the deal with this bridge? Is it a brand new bridge? Are we tearing down the old one? What's going on?
Well, I think what people should know is, first of all, I kind of have to go back a few years. We had a shutdown of the I-40 bridge over the Mississippi River. And, I remember there's a quote. I don't know if there was a former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, and he may not have been the one to come up with it, but never let a crisis go to waste. So when that bridge, there was a structural fault in that bridge, which led to them rerouting traffic to the I-55 bridge for trucks and vehicles to get across the Mississippi. And I think that was during one of those times where not only were we bringing attention to the need for resilience in our passages across the Mississippi and more capacity, it also honestly just kind of pointed out, wait a minute, this I-55 bridge is a little older, isn't it, right? So what we ended up with is that we found ourselves, and shout out to Clay Bright, who used to be the commissioner for Tennessee Department of Transportation, and shout out to our friend, Clay Bright is definitely our friend, and also our friend, Commissioner of Transportation Butch Ely, who also happens to be the deputy governor. Found ourselves in the space of advocating for a new bridge, and we found that a replacement bridge is like the short way where we could access federal funding, infrastructure bill that passed, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed at the federal level. And it just opened up a way for us to be able to build a replacement bridge across the Mississippi. And so that's what we're doing. In time, the old bridge will come down. It won't happen all at once, but the new bridge will be built as the old bridge is still being used. And so we're looking forward to it. It's going to make it where if the big one ever hits, we know that bridge will be it's being seismically built to withstand that, and it also replacing a pretty old bridge, if you will. So we're very excited about it. Our advocacy, our transportation committee played a critical role. John Dudas, Julie Ellis, James Collins, Beth Flanagan, and others. And so we're just happy that we've landed this in partnership with TDOT and also RDOT, Arkansas Department of Transportation. And shout out to government on both sides.
So I've heard that it's been roughly 20 years in the making, this bridge. It's been something that's been talked about for a long time. How come it's been so long?
Well, I'll say that, I'll go back to what I mentioned about not letting the crisis go to waste. Honestly, I think that shutdown of the I-40 bridge ended up creating a moment. That's number one. Number two, this is the thing about, let me back up for a moment, Taylor, because I think it's important to recognize people think that things happen overnight. Big things don't always happen overnight. There is a history. When we talk about the 20 years, it was like 20 years of making sure people understood the importance that Memphis plays in the nation, right? We've been using that name, America's River Crossing, as the name of that replacement bridge project for good reason, because it's critical not just to Memphis or to Arkansas. It's a critical artery for logistics and distribution for the nation and, quite frankly, internationally as well, what comes across the Mississippi River at Memphis. So a lot of that 20 years we talk about has been making sure people understand the important role that Memphis plays. Now, to get skinny in terms of what's happened in the last few years, a few things had to come together. One, federal legislation around infrastructure. That passed and that created opportunities. In fact, it created the grant opportunity that allowed us to access that $400 million to go toward the building of the bridge. Two, alignment on both sides, right? Arkansas and Tennessee. And so to see the synergy between state government on both sides, that was important. And then the third thing is there was the passage of the Tennessee Modernization Act by the Tennessee General Assembly, which allowed for these new ways of making investment in projects like this and provided the matching funds that paired up with Arkansas's matching funds, like $200 million plus from Arkansas and Tennessee, which essentially led to us being able to partner with the $400 million from federal government. So I will just say that it was a convergence of things that had to come together to make this bridge possible, because nobody's walking around with like $1 billion in their pocket, right?
Right.
So it took some time for these things to kind of come together. And I will just say the very tight advocacy we've had over the last 5-6 years is really what helped to get us here.
Well, congratulations, because that is a huge achievement. It's huge for Memphis. It's huge for Tennessee, huge for Arkansas, and the folks over in West Memphis.
Absolutely.
So congratulations.
Well, I can't take any credit. I'll say this, but our transportation committee, I can't say enough about our friends at TDOT. I can go down the line from Steve Townsend and JB and Nicole and Brandon, that crew over there. And then also folks like Bill Donovan, who got us in the game in terms of our being able to play a role with the shaping of the grant proposal, and Ted Townsend, Mr. President of the chamber, as well as our friends in Arkansas. So again, all of these folks working there, teamwork makes the dream work. This is a great example of teamwork.
When can we expect construction to start, and what's that project timeline?
Well, we're looking at the funds probably being obligated 2026. And so from there, we're looking at probably, 3 to 5 years for the project to be completed. And let me just say that big projects like this, we had an unfortunate history, not just us, but in different places when there's a project that has anything to do with government. Well, I may not be here, but my grandchildren will be, so we're definitely not in that space regarding this project and how it will proceed, in part thanks to Tennessee Modernization Act. So we're very excited about us being able to see that new bridge, break ground on a new bridge a few years from now.
That's great. So let's move on into policy and some of the trending topics that we are seeing.
Sure.
So across the country, and really, I guess, the world, we're seeing an emergence of artificial intelligence, even here in our own city especially. But we're seeing rapid advancements, and it's important for us as a society to create rules and guidelines for proper usage.
Right.
This is something that was mentioned in our legislative agenda, which listeners can find online. So what's our chamber's stance? What's our thoughts on that?
Well, it goes back to something I mentioned earlier. I mean, I think that we have a lot of well-intended intentions, good intentions from legislative bodies, across the country, who are trying to figure things out, especially when it comes to the introduction of something as new and innovative and game-changing as artificial intelligence. But herein lies the mantra I've kind of mentioned just recently, or just a moment ago, which is that the need for communicating with these folks, right? I mean, before we go create new policy and come up with ideas, I think the thing for us to do is to have conversations, right? And to allow yourself to be open to talk to industry leaders and business leaders, so you can have a feel for how your legislation might impact them, right? I think that that's just a great concept overall. So our legislative agenda, we really didn't get into any specifics as much as we just wanted to make sure that before any steps were made in the direction of trying to solve for something that people think might be of concern or an issue, hey, listen, we have good folks in the AI space in Tennessee. Let's make sure that they can be made available. And then there's an AI council with the state of Tennessee. And so a shout out to Roger Waynick. We appreciate them and Commissioner Bryson, Finance and Administration. So just make sure, that's our thing, is just make sure we're talking to folks and getting perspective before just jumping out there. And again, I never like to be in a space where we're coming out against any legislation. I like for us to have already had these conversations. So by the time some legislation is introduced, it actually is taken into account perspective that we're able to help facilitate by providing industry professionals who can help advise these elected officials.
In a similar vein, everyone wants to know about xAI. So recently, xAI was in front of the city council,
right,
and I believe it was land approval specifically for a gray water facility. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a piece of property about 13 acres or a little bit more than that, that the city owned, that would allow xAI to build a gray water facility. And for those, let me just say, it's a wastewater reuse facility where wastewater would be taken, it would be treated, and then that water would be used for industrial purposes by xAI, by Tennessee Valley Authority, and by Nucor Steel.
So why do they feel the need to build a gray water facility? What's the purpose for them?
Okay, good point. I think the thing for them, and let me say, I love the city of Memphis, right? I love the citizens of our great city. And I recognize that whenever there's something new or when there's controversial figures, even that might be connected to projects or opportunities like this, that there's skepticism and there are concerns. But I will say this, that the building of this wastewater reuse facility, I think, should underscore the investment from this company because it's not just in service to them, it's in service to Nucor Steel and Tennessee Valley Authority. Our issue is that we have this wonderful aquifer, right? That this great drinking water. If you never had Memphis drinking water, it's better than the bottled water in a whole lot of other places. And it comes right out of our faucet. And there is a huge concern about these wells, about the aquifers that supply the drinking water to Memphians. The Gray Water Facility would essentially allow for us to reduce water being pulled from the aquifer to about 4.7 billion gallons of water that would not have to be pulled from the aquifer with the full use of this gray water facility or this wastewater reuse facility that xAI is building to the tune of about $80 million. So I just want to pause for a moment and just let us understand that they have this concept that they do not believe that drinking water should be used to cool a computer. And so as a result, they're making this investment and we're really happy about it. And we appreciate the unanimous vote we got from the city council in support of the land deal that is going to lead to the construction of that wastewater reuse facility.
So right now, are they using any water from our aquifer?
Yeah, there is some amount of water but it's not being used for industrial purposes. I think the thing that a lot of our concerned citizens have also missed, and just let me say, generally speaking, questions being asked. Hey, we love to hear questions because we do like to provide clarity. But they already had a closed loop system built inside of their facility where essentially they were reusing water. And it cools the computer, it gets heated up, they cool it back, and it goes back through. Because water is one of the ways to cool the supercomputer as it heats up with all these computations and whatnot. So there's aquifer. Yeah, they have water fountains and other things there. So there's water from the aquifer being used at the facility. But those the water from the aquifer is not what's the water that's being used to actually cool or the supercomputer, or I should say, it's not being used for industrial uses.
So let me just make sure I have this correct that I'm understanding. They are using it for common things like we would have at our house, like our tap water or shower or whatever. Right. But the water that they are using to cool computers is coming from elsewhere. It's recycled. This water that they are recycling. It's not water that, we heard a thing about 1 million gallons a day because actually any facility that had been put at that particular site could use up to 1 million gallons per day, but they're not using 1 million gallons per day from the aquifer. They actually are using recycled water right now, and they're making plans to build this wastewater recycle facility, which will allow them to no longer use just this closed loop internally, but allow them to be plugged into this gray water facility, recycle facility, where them, TVA, and Nucor Steel would be all using this reused wastewater for industrial uses. So what are the implications for the whole city on that? Is this something civilians will have access to, or is it strictly for industrial purposes?
It's industrial purposes in that area, right? It's, they are in a place zoned for this type of thing, right? And so it's being built in connection with the Maxim facility, water treatment facility. So the way the general public or citizens will benefit is just the idea that it's protecting the aquifer. It's providing for there to be 4.7 billion gallons of water remaining in the aquifer every year and not being pulled out for industrial uses.
I think it's really cool to see that they're making this kind of investment and that it's going to be beneficial not just to them but to other entities in our community. Even if it's not I'm not personally as an individual using that facility. It's still benefiting me, but even more so, it's benefiting the businesses in our community that provide so many other different resources for us.
Yeah, and everybody wants to protect the aquifer. And let me say, members of our activist community, our elected officials, there's been concerns, and there have been this thing. I used to work in city government. Yeah, there was this thing about, yes, we do need a facility like this. But the reality of it is that as much as a number of local people knew that we needed this facility, we didn't have any money in the plan. We didn't have plans, and we didn't have money saved up to go toward the building of such a facility. So we're really excited about this huge step forward.
Before we move on, let's just briefly touch on any other environmental concerns around xAI. Do you have any insights that might be able to help address community concerns on that?
Well, I will just say this: gas turbines is a thing that has been talked about, and I really loved, and I know that there'll probably be a future episode to talk a little bit more about it. But the types of gas turbines being used, they're a small number. These are, I can't remember exactly the number, 15 or however many it is. I get my acres for the wastewater facility, reuse facility, mixed up with the number of gas turbines. But those turbines were used from the beginning because of how they did not want to plug the supercomputer during its training phases with those fluctuations directly into our electrical grid. I will just say this, that the type of gas turbines being used makes it, they're very sophisticated. I think people have this image of what those turbines look like and are. These gas turbines, when you see them, we've had a number of tours out there, you wouldn't even know that they're on. And then they actually reduce by about 85% the radius that a normal gas turbine would go out. And so Mayor Young at an event just this past Saturday made sure to share with the crowd that because of that, these folks or these turbines and the compilation of those turbines are not viewed as a major pollutant. But they are viewed as a minor pollutant in the same way that, hey, there's a certain amount of things you have to deal with a gas station or even with the cleaners. He made that analogy, and I think it really brought to light the type of innovative ways in which the company is doing this work, but then also kind of challenges people's images of things. Things have changed. There are new and different ways we see some of these things being implemented, and the devices that are used now are not the same way that we have this image in our head of what it looked like back in the 80s or even the 90s.
Right. So there's also been some talk about cargo theft, kind of switching gears here. And as a logistics hub, this is an area that's a concern for many of our members of our business community. So give us a rundown of the issue and how it got brought to your attention.
Yeah, this issue got brought to us. We have 5 Class 1 railroads here. There's CN, there's BNSF, there is Norfolk Southern, there is CSX, and there is UP, Union Pacific. All 5 of them in Memphis and the operations, we found that there was this issue of cargo theft that had come to the forefront, and it was a concern with our railroad community. We had a huge major meeting at the beginning of 2024 with our U.S. attorney at the time, Kevin, U.S. attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, Kevin Ritz. We had the chief of police there, we had the sheriff's department, and we had representatives of all 5 of those Class 1 railroads, as well as the railroad police and other folks. It was a huge gathering, packed out room in our boardroom, which, as you know, is pretty big. It's hard to pack that place out. It was a packed out audience, and we had done that because we wanted to see, hey, what are the things you guys are trying to solve for? How can we be more supportive as a chamber? And the issue of cargo theft kind of came up. And we found not only was it railroad, but there were other modes of transportation, our other shippers and whatnot. Cargo theft was an issue. So we took this on. as a legislative item, working with Railroad Association. And let me say, they took the lead, Truckers Association and others, and we've been supportive as a piece of legislation where the penalty for stealing, it will go from one class of felony to another class of felony, which would be a more serious crime. And so we're working that through in the legislature right now. Our advocates are working it through. We're coming near to the end and being able to hopefully report some good news there. But I want to just appreciate members of our business community who've leaned in and supported this item, which is so important to so many. I think the last thing I also will say, I want to give a shout out to Memphis Police and the mayor and others, because we saw a significant decline of 40% or so in terms of cargo theft within the last several months. I can't remember how many months it's been, but latter part of last year up through where we are right now, a pretty significant drop. So I want to shout out all partners engaged in ways they've looked at strategies, redone operations, how we've tightened up the public sector engagement, and definitely law enforcement officials.
Definitely. And you said that it's in the legislature right now. It's going through the process.
Yes, it's been supported, and we appreciate sponsors and others who have worked really hard on this. We're at a point right now where it's going what they call behind the budget. And I want to get nerdy, a bunch of inside baseball terms, but it is still viable. And we're just trying to ensure that the funds that need to be identified, there's a fiscal note that comes with it. And that is basically, hey, if we put this law or make this a law, there's going to be financial implications. So there's this fiscal note attached to this legislation that we're just ensuring is covered, but it still has support from leadership in the General Assembly. And we're very happy and looking to see where it lands, but we're very hopeful.
So once it gets this fiscal note approved or figured out, what's the next step for it?
Well, the implementation piece is how it goes, and there's a process for how you introduce how things get implemented. I would just say this: it's one of those things where the implementation of this wouldn't be difficult. It's just the idea that what's the communication aid? That's just a greater penalty for someone who might have a felony. They were caught stealing from cargo. They were caught in the middle of cargo theft, I should say, stealing from a truck or something of the sort. And now things just work through. So now our law, not just our law enforcement, but our criminal justice system needs to ensure that they are up on this update to legislation, which means there's a stiffer penalty tied to that individual who may have been caught red-handed.
So we've been seeing a lot in the media about school districts and school boards,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly here in Memphis.
Right.
And now we're hearing reports from the state level that there is some sort of takeover or something in that capacity. Could you explain that? What does that mean?
Ooh, how long do we have? We could have started out with this like a few minutes ago because it's a long story. I will just say this. We're at a point now where legislation has been offered from chairman of the education committee there in Nashville as it relates to the appointment of a 9-member kind of a management team to whom the school board, the Memphis Shelby County School Board, would report. And that 9-member management team would have authority over certain things. Well, there will be approval needed in certain things that the board would do, and that 9-member management team would have certain opportunities to engage and, quite frankly, approve or disapprove of certain actions taken by board members. I will say this, that because this is the part where, honestly, Taylor, and I have to, everything isn't as black and white, right? I have to tell people oftentimes I have to get personal feelings out of everything, and I have to think about the strategy of it. The strategy of it is this, is that legislation, based upon the engagement of leadership there in Nashville, great chance of passing. And so there's a segment of our community, and I absolutely understand the whole idea of what they view as overreach from Nashville. But at the same time, you have to understand some of the frustrations regarding performance and other things that have come out of here. And then even, some of the concerns that have come up and been considered in Nashville. But again, I have to get myself out of feelings on all of this. And I can be quite opinionated, but what I absolutely know is this: we can't be flat-footed when it comes to stuff like this. If it's legislation that we may not necessarily all the way agree with, and mind you, we've got to, number one, how can we maybe tweak the legislation or provide insights? How can we provide suggestions and work with folks? And then what will the implications be and how will we adjust accordingly? So I tell people all the time, I don't bring my feelings to the job when it comes to public policy. You just have to be a realist in terms of what is and what is not and work from there. I would not be doing a good job here if I brought my feelings and allow my feelings to shape our strategy. Our strategies have to be shaped just by what's good politically speaking. And for us, it makes sense for us to ensure that we're making our voice heard, because there is a frustration that we all understand. We're making our voice heard. We're providing insight. And then we're thinking through, if this legislation does pass, what are the implications? How do we pivot? How do we support? What do we do from there? So while some people are there, I'm down the street. Some people are going, some people are, I should put it this way. Some people are going back there. I'm actually going down the street because that's the way that it's actually coming. And I want to make sure that our investors are able to be engaged, because ultimately everybody wants a school district that produces high quality individuals, young folks who can go out here and change this community, change the world, and make their mark on society and make their families proud, right? How we get there is up for debate. But one thing I won't debate, though, is this: how we implement strategy to make sure that we are playing a part in wherever this lands.
So is this, from the state, is this a permanent solution for us, or is this temporary? Like, what's the idea behind it?
Yeah, the idea is that this would be a temporary, engagement or intervention, right? Where at the end of it, the intervention itself would not be something that would last, but for a certain amount of time. I think maybe 4 years. I can't remember exactly how it's written, but keep in mind this. The idea is, like, this even gets to why you think about, hey, how can we talk to the folks who are writing the legislation, to talk to them about, okay, what are the things that can get the district out of this model of intervention, right? And thinking through that. So this is seen as not a permanent, but a temporary piece with some performance standards or some standards that have to be met or should be met in order for this to unwind and things go back to normal, or I should say the traditional setup for the district.
So why does this really matter to the business community?
Oh, I mean, MSCS is the biggest thing going. It matters to the business community because those students are the ones that we want to hire for businesses. That's the talent that, it matters as well, because guess what? Our tax dollars are going to fund that district. So if I'm funding something, I want to make sure I'm getting a good product out on the other end, and I'm not reducing these wonderful, hopeful young people and mentioning them just as a product. But you want a return on your investment, and the return on the investment for this community is a production of a young person who is able to read and think and be analytical and has had their imagination spurred and are ready to become great, productive citizens in a way that helps to make Memphis better. The mayor has a line, I'll steal it. He says that about folks who talk about Atlanta and some of these others, Chicago doesn't need you. Atlanta doesn't need you. Memphis, we need you. But that need is tied to ensuring that the folks coming out of the school district are set for the change that we need to see.
Right. And members of our chamber team have often discussed about how workforce development starts with education and the various pathways that you can take with that. And so I think it's important that we have a solution and that we are taking those steps towards something permanent. And obviously this is just a stepping stone to that.
Yeah. And I'll say this look, if you ever want to get frustrated, spend a little time trying to keep up with government, right? Trying to see the back and forth. And I always I'm not in the politics of tearing down people. I'm in the politics of being hopeful. I'm in the politics of trying to figure out a way we can come together on the same page, because ultimately, I think we all want what's in bed. And we just have different views about how we get to the same place. We all want to be and go to the same place. It's just fundamentally, there are often different views about how we get there. So, yes, absolutely.
So you just said it yourself, Bobby, there is so much to unpack in this world of government and policy. But as we are beginning to wrap up, I really just have one final question for you.
Sure.
What is the one thing listeners should remember when it comes to business and the government or policy?
I think that when it comes to business, I think that having your voice heard, whether you're a citizen, whether you're a local business, having your voice heard, if you're an industry, if you're a nonprofit organization, having your voice heard, it's important, because I think too often people don't become engaged until something goes wrong. And that's when they start to scurry around, and they don't even have relationships with some of these folks that hopefully we want them to have. Because again, having your voice heard is important. And that's one reason that we do what we do. Because honestly, the supermajority, I'll say this again, supermajority of our members are small businesses. They are trying to make payroll. They don't have time to go down to a city council or county commission meeting, but they need a voice, and we try to be that voice. And the more they talk to us and let us hear their voice, the more we can shape how we can become their voice and try to make change for the better.
Bobby, thank you so much for that. And
thank you. It's been a joy.
Those insights. Thanks for joining us on the Talk Chamber. We are so glad to have this time with you.
Thank you. And listen, there's no video in here, but let me say, this is a cool setup you have here, Taylor.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Talk Chamber. To sum up what we heard from Bobby today, advocacy starts with listening. Memphis needs you. And finally, be in the politics of hopefulness, not the politics of tearing others down. If you enjoyed this episode or learned a valuable piece of information, share this episode with a friend. Subscribe to the Talk Chamber to keep up with the latest on the Chamber, economic developments, and all things Memphis. Follow us on social media at Memphis Chamber, and we'll see you next time.